Hi, Emery. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
So I think one of the things Atlantic readers in particular will be interested in is the evolution that you've gone through since your Atlantic piece. It's very apparent reading the book that you heard from a lot of people and you really took their feedback to heart. Can you talk a little bit about your own evolution on these questions?
Yeah, absolutely. And the response to the Atlantic article is really what convinced me to write the book, because I didn't want to write a book. I wanted to write a foreign policy book, but I got such a wave of emails and blog commentary and conversation, and then I'd give speeches and people would talk to me and I would talk to my own family, and my thinking really did evolve. And most importantly, I started realizing that although we say men and women are equal, we have been consistently devaluing traditional women's work. So it's as if we're saying men and women are equal, but men's work is important and traditional women's work is not. And that, once I started thinking about it that way, I thought that can't be right. You can't do that.
Right.
And then the other piece that was so important was that men wrote to me about what they wanted. And one guy wrote to me and said, I want more time with my children. I don't like being socialized into this role as the breadwinner. And you are probably thinking, oh, well, he's just one guy, but actually lots of us feel this way. And remember, men didn't believe that women wanted to work back in the 60s and 70s. Well,
Right.
Women may not believe that men actually want to be much more fully engaged in families. You have to let us do it. So those are the two big changes, the sort of valuing of care and realizing that if we are really going to get to gender equality, it's not just about men helping and men, kind of promoting us. It's about men owning the care side of our lives just as much as the competition side.
One of the things you're arguing is that care isn't something that only women care about or only well-off women. It's something that can really unify women and men up and down the economic ladder.
Absolutely.
So how does that work?
So I think you have to start with what we mean by care, and because we have to value what it is. And I think many of us think about it as, all that physical work. There's the bathing and the dressing and the feeding and the driving, it's all the stuff. But, that's all work that is basically the sort of platform for what care's really about, which is the nurturing of other individuals, the investing in others rather than investing in ourselves. And then I started thinking about, as you said, we've got too few women at the top, but we have far too many women at the bottom. And those women at the bottom are the caregivers as well as the breadwinners, and we are not supporting their care. We're expecting them to work, and I believe in the dignity of work, but we are also expecting them without money to somehow take care of kids and parents and others in their family without any support. And the result of that is that they don't have time to provide the kind of stimulation that makes all the difference for their children, and that they don't have time to provide what I call kind of the central infrastructure of care that a healthy society needs.
Can you talk a little bit about just why it feels different to be a working mom as opposed to a working dad?
Well, to start with, we never call them working dads, right? And that tells you something right there. We talk about working mothers, and working mothers need flexibility and part-time, but we never talk about working fathers. And the assumption is still the guy is the primary breadwinner, and the woman has a choice. She can be a breadwinner and a caregiver, at least for those people who have some flexibility about how they work. So this was another moment of sort of personal realization where I looked at our sons, who are now 16 and 18, and I realized I'm a staunch feminist, but if I had daughters, I'd be raising them completely differently than my mother was raised. I'd be raising them the way my guess is you were raised, to believe you could combine, being a professional and having a family life in equal measure. I looked at my sons and I thought, I'm raising them more or less the way my father was raised, because the expectation for a boy is your value in life is determined by what kind of provider of cash you are, right? How far you rise, how much money you make, how much power you wield. And that's just, it's not fair to them, right? I mean, if women wanted to break out of being nurturers, why don't we think men also want to break out of being breadwinners? So we really have to start thinking about it not as this thing we ask men to help with, but as if you're a man and you choose to have children, then you and your spouse, and that could be another man, of course, or a woman, have decided to be both caregivers and breadwinners, and you should be dividing it up in a way that allows both of you to have both. Now, to your point, when a guy does that,
Right.
not only do people think he's not committed to his career, which happens to women too, but the biggest barrier is that people really think he's emasculated. And that, as far as I'm concerned, is the elephant in the room that none of us want to touch, including women. Because there are a ton of CEO women who have lead parent husbands who are not talking about them.
Right.
And young women don't really want to hear that, you know, your mate is going to have to make compromises for his career so that you can have yours, because we're still basically locked into this idea that a good man is a provider. And I want to say a good man is a provider of care just as much as of cash.
And that brings up something else I wanted to ask you, which is just about what are the generational shifts you're seeing? Did you notice in the responses to your article differences in the younger men versus men who had been in the workforce for a while? What do you think is, or for women as well, what do you think shifts are ongoing right now?
So the responses I got from younger men were very consistent with new research that's showing that millennial men start out really committed to 50-50 parenting, 50-50 working. When they get into the workforce and they try to act on those principles, they quickly discover what you said before, that they are suddenly really being devalued, and it's shocking. And they also don't get paternity leave, so they don't get the chance to bond with their child really early on, which means that's path dependence. You know, if anything in a marriage, if you do it first and you become competent, you're then the agent, and you know the other person's the helper. So
Totally.
Millennial men want change, but my point is it's not going to be enough to then fight that through advancing women. They're going to have to come together with women and say, we want change, and that's got to be change in the workplace, and this is about us as well.
This gets to another point that you talk about throughout your book, but just that the current system is causing the economy to miss out on a huge pool of talent. Not just women who are moms, but also men and women who are taking care of their parents or whatever else. What are the costs to society that you see of this current situation?
You know, it's extraordinary. McKinsey just issued this report that said, the first thing it said that the value of care work that women and some men are doing around the world, the value of care work was $10 trillion. That's an economy the size of China's, right? I mean, if you had all women, you know, imagine a nation called Womania, $10 trillion. That would be the third largest economy in the world. But equally importantly, it estimated that the lost value to us of not tapping the talent of caregivers is $28 trillion, which is the size of the United States and China combined. So the numbers are huge, and it's obvious if we believe, as we have to believe, that talent is equally distributed, then we've got a system that is only tapping a fraction of that talent, and that is suppressing all the education, the innovation, the diligence, the industry of millions and millions, really billions of people who are now being shut out because care has to be done just as much as breadwinning has to be done. So there is an enormous opportunity here, and we should be thinking about it. You know, again, this is not a women's problem. This is a work problem. It is a national problem. It is an international problem. It's an economic problem. It's a moral problem. That's the way we have to approach it, and we have to finish the revolution.